equally qualified men. They are paid less and promoted slower for doing similar work. Women are routinely shut out of good jobs in high-paying industries, such as science and technology, construction and truck driving, in part because our society tells women that some industries are just not for them. And as study after study has shown, women are expected to shoulder an unequal share of unpaid caregiving responsibilities. When families cannot afford or cannot find caregiving, such as childcare, elder care, or home care, it often falls on women to fill the gaps, whether that means going part-time or leaving the workforce entirely, or working full-time at a paid job and full-time performing unpaid caregiving. And over the past 2 years, the pandemic has only deepened these inequities as caregiving has become more expensive and more difficult to find. And here's how it all adds up. Today, on average, working women who are working full-time, year-round, make just 83 cents for every dollar that a man makes. And for many women of color, the gap is even wider. Over a 40-year career, a woman will lose out on about $400,000. For Black women, Latina women, Native American women, that loss in wages is closer to $1 million. And of course, that is money that a woman could use to pay off her student loan debt, or put a down payment on a house, or pay a mortgage, or invest in a small business, or save for retirement. As one must recognize, lower wages mean working women have less money to save today, and lower wages mean they receive lower Social Security benefits in their senior years. For so many women, the gender wage gap acts as a virtual tax, making it so much more difficult to pay the bills and invest in their future. It can also have a negative impact on their productivity, job satisfaction, and retention. And by extension, it can have a negative impact on individual businesses and on our economy as a whole. As the business leaders here today will tell us, closing the gender wage gap, well, it's not just a moral issue, it's also a business one. If we are going to continue to grow our economy and to be competitive and lead the world in the 21st century, we simply cannot afford to leave half of our workforce behind. To build an economy that works for all of us, we must build an economy that works for women. That is one of our administration's central missions, and that has been a central mission of mine for quite some time. In fact, when I served in the United States Senate, I introduced what we named the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights Act to ensure that domestic workers, 90% of whom are women, they are paid fairly and that their rights are protected. And with Senator Patty Murray of Washington and Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, I co-sponsored the Paycheck Fairness Act to make it easier for employees to bring equal pay claims against their employers. And over the past year, our administration has taken important action to address the gender wage gap. We passed the American Rescue Plan, which provided immediate relief to millions of women who were severely impacted by the pandemic. We passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is creating good-paying, good union jobs, including for many women in industries where they are underrepresented, such as transportation, clean energy, and construction. Today, we are taking additional steps to help increase pay equity across our nation. One factor that contributes to pay inequity is the common practice of requiring job applicants to share their salary history. Now think about that. Why does that matter? Well, in effect, it's allowing how much an employee was paid in the past to impact how much they will be paid in the future. So think about that. For many women, this practice can mean that inequitable pay from a previous job will follow them to the current job, and so on and so on. So our administration is committed to eliminating discriminatory pay practices that inhibit the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the federal government. And that's why today our Office of Personnel Management will begin work to address the use of salary history in the hiring and pay-setting process for federal employees. And today, the President, Joe Biden, will sign an executive order that directs the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council to consider limiting the use of salary history in employment decisions by federal contractors. In addition, today, our Department of Labor will direct federal contractors to strengthen pay audits. Pay audits help organizations determine whether they are paying all their employees equitably, and if they are not, give them data to help correct that inequity. The President and I firmly believe that all companies should conduct these audits, and where appropriate, should be transparent about the results. By the way, I think it's always appropriate to be transparent about the results, because pay transparency creates accountability. And accountability, well, that drives progress. Our administration cannot bridge the wage gap alone. It will truly take all of us working together. And that is why we are gathered here today at this summit. We can build a more fair, more efficient, and more equitable economy. As I said and truly believe, an economy that works for women and for everyone. That's how it goes. An economy that works for women works for everyone. And so together we will continue to do this good work. I thank you all the leaders who are here, and let us continue with this important work until we truly reach a place where all workers and all people are treated fairly. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Marty Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank everyone here today who is sharing your experience. It's a true honor to be at this event. I want to give a special shout out to our incredible Vice President Kamala Harris. She's certainly an inspiration to all women, young women all over this country. I'll tell you a quick story. We were on a trip last week, and there was a young woman, 10-year-old young girl, sitting in the front row. And when the Vice President got on the stage, her eyes lit up. And afterwards, I went over to her and I said, "How you doing?" She said, "I'm good." And she said to me, "I want to meet the Vice President." I said, "Don't worry, we're going to make it happen." And she is an inspiration for young girls all across America, young women all across America, for women all across America and all across this country. So I want to thank you, Madam Vice President. I also want to thank Jennifer Klein for her great work. I know Jennifer's running around here organizing. Thank you, Jennifer, for the amazing work you do. And it would be remiss not to give a shout out to some of the members of the U.S. national soccer players that are here with us today. You are an inspiration on the field. You make our country proud. But more importantly, you have been a huge inspiration off the field, fighting for equality for women all across this country and all across this globe. So I want to thank you for what you do and who you're standing up for. Truly are an inspiration. I also just want to, my parents were immigrants from Ireland. My mother came to America from Ireland when she was 17 years old. She came here to do she came actually to make some money to send back home. She did domestic work. I owe so much to her, to my mom, who I am today. And I think about how hard she worked when we talk about these issues. When I talk about women and women of color and immigrants, I think of my mother because she was an immigrant. And she came here at a very young age and had nothing. She had her aunt was here. And I think about making sure that in my role, whether it's my role as Secretary of Labor right now, my previous role as Mayor of Boston, or my role before that as a union person or a state legislator, it's important for us to keep the fight up. In my role today, Secretary of Labor at the Department of Labor, I'm very honored and lucky to have so many dedicated people work with me every day, and we're committed to gender equity. That work is led by our Women's Bureau, and our commitment to equity shapes everything that we do. So Equal Pay Day is an important day for us. It's not only a measure of the gender pay gap, it's a measure of the work we must do to close the gap. I was at an event earlier today with Speaker Pelosi, and she was saying before she got on the stage, how wonderful it would be if she didn't have to do these events anymore. That if you can imagine women actually get paid the same as men, it would really be earth-shattering, something like that, she said. And she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right in what her words were. For too long, our economy has rested too much on unpaid or underpaid women. Let women do the work in our country, especially women of color. And that's not right. It's not good for our country, and it has to change, and it's time to change. Today, we published a report, the Department of Labor, the Women's Bureau, we published a report. It's called Bearing the Cost, How Overrepresentation is Undervalued, Roles Hurt Women During the Pandemic. It's not just about the pandemic, but it's about low pay. It's about limited opportunities that left women vulnerable during the pandemic. And obviously, we can look at this report and go back 200 years and pretty much come to the same conclusion, and continue to leave women vulnerable, especially women of color. This injustice has been created over many decades in our country. But thanks to the leadership today of the president and the vice president, we're addressing this issue head on and right now. We're building a historic worker-centered recovery, and we're determined to use this moment to provide women the opportunity, the wages, and the equality and equity that they deserve. At the Department of Labor this year, we launched the Good Jobs Initiative. It's something that we created. This goal is to improve job quality and job equity across the economy and also across all of our different departments here in the federal government. It means opening up good jobs to all workers, so that investing in career pathways for women, like apprenticeships that lead to good jobs, good union jobs, union infrastructure jobs that we're creating right now here in the United States. It means creating good jobs in every industry, whether you work in childcare, retail, restaurants, teaching, or professional soccer players. You deserve fair wages, paid leave, and access to childcare, safety, respect, and dignity in your job. We can start with the workers here in the federal government who work for our federal government. Last year, the president raised the minimum wage for federal contractors to $15 an hour. It might sound crazy that we had workers working for the federal government that were being paid $6 and $7, $8 an hour. We have implemented that order. We have raised overpay for over 300,000 workers who are disproportionately women and people of color. In addition, today, our Office of Federal Contract Compliance Program issued a directive to strengthen pay equity audits conducted by federal contractors. What that means is when the contracts go out, we look at the audits to see if the contracts actually made it to the pockets they're supposed to and do the backup we're supposed to have. We're also proud to play a role in pay equity and pay transparency executive order the Vice President announced a few minutes ago. Ultimately, our goal is and needs to empower women in the economy. One of the most proven ways to get power is to join a union. And that's how I got my opportunity along with millions of others. I also spoke this morning over at the Capitol Hill, and we had a woman who was a sheet metal worker for 25 years, and she stood at the podium. She talked about working in the field. And she gets paid exactly the same as her male counterpart doing exactly the same work, because the collective bargaining agreement says that. The bargaining agreement doesn't say, well, men get paid more than women. It says everyone gets paid equally across the board. And I had that opportunity to see it up close in person. And the fact is that women and workers of color in unions earn better and more equal wages than their non-union counterparts. The pay gaps are smaller, and the workplace is safer, with less discrimination and harassment. And we still have work to do there, too. I'm not saying we don't have work to do there. We absolutely do. I am honored to serve with the Vice President as her Vice Chair of the White House Task Force on Worker Empowerment and Organizing. We want to make sure that all workers know they have the right to join a union. When I think about the impacts you can have, when I think about the impacts you ladies had, I think about workers like I met Leslie Cotton in Portland, Oregon. Leslie was living with her elderly dad, helping care for her disabled brother. I met her at an event when I was in Oregon a few months ago, and she was barely getting by in her low-income job, and she talked about it. She found a better opportunity in a pre-apprentice program, which is called Oregon Tradeswomen. And this is a tradeswoman group into the building trades that allowed Leslie the chance to get into the building trades and funded in partnership with the Department of Labor. She's now a union plumber in a middle-class job with good wages, good health, and a future pension. That's what we need to strive for. That's what we need to continue to fight for every single day. The bottom line is this administration doesn't just talk about gender equity and equal pay. You can see it in the policies that the president and the vice president rolled out. You can see it in the infrastructure law. You can see it in the bills that we filed. You can see it in the executive orders they're filed. You can see it all across the agency. You can see it when the president and vice president have us all and his cabinet members in a meeting demanding to us that we do this work, that we carry this work out. We have to finish the job. We can't talk about it anymore. The talking is done. We are taking action every single day to advance fairness and justice in our economy, and will not stop fighting until the pay gap is closed. Equal Pay Day is January 1st every single year. It is March 15th, 2022. At some point, we need to stop having these conversations, and people need to react to the stories you're hearing. So again, thank you very much. And again, to the soccer team, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Nahuja, Director of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. Income inequality impacts every woman and every family, and also has a larger...
You've been watching the White House Equal Pay Day Summit. We've heard from the Vice President, Labor Secretary, and other administration officials speak. In just a few minutes, the Vice President will speak with the U.S. women's soccer team. We will head back to that event when that conversation begins.
But for now, we're going to take a quick break. We've got a lot more news ahead. You're streaming CBS News, always on.
When these Holocaust survivors are gone, who will warn us to never forget? When some people don't know. Undeniable. The Truth to Remember, streaming now.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I wasn't given an explanation. I was just like, what did I do?
It's not okay to shut down my voice simply because it's not the same as yours.
How those rules are enforced is something that the rest of us know very, very little about.
The First Amendment protects all of us from the government limiting our speech. The companies have the ability to decide what speech they will allow. They're not the government.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.